You know, it's interesting seeing, we've been talking in the class about the sort of endless creativity, is probably the positive way of spinning it, of patent valuation and setting up license agreements, whether it's, you know, an upfront fee or annual fees or royalties that scale up or royalties that scale down, and there's all these different ways of doing the economics. And over the last few years, you've seen some firms that have tried to create exceptionally creative and complicated models like IPXI, which was supposed to come talk to the class about their model for doing spot market valuations based on the sort of IPO process with roadshows and a market and fluctuating patent prices based on unit licensing rights. It's somewhat telling that they were unable to come to class because they went out of business during the semester. So despite some incredibly smart people trying to make that work. And then you have firms like I think we've spoken to AST, Allied Security Trust, and others, which are in some ways seem like a very pragmatist model of saying, you know, you put patents on a scale in some ways, and this is what patents are selling for these days. And so, I mean, not necessarily AST, but that there's a value of, you know, patents might go for $200,000 a patent 5 years ago, and now it's $130,000 a patent. It's almost like you're weighing fish. And in some ways, it's a counterintuitive model, considering we spend a lot of time in the class thinking about the uniqueness of each asset. So the idea of them being piled up on a scale is hard to imagine. I know that Google in particular has been actively involved in a variety of different experiments, like the license on transfer model, United Patents, and your new one that was just announced this week. I was wondering, maybe you could just sort of tick through some of these different approaches and how they came to life. And then if the rest of the panelists have any thoughts on sort of your favorite model you've seen and where you think this world is evolving to, that'd be interesting.
Yeah, happy to. And so I think all of these experiments start with the recognition that trolls are asserting patents that came from operating companies 70% of the time. So 70% of the litigated assets that come back at us and other operating companies are coming from our competitors. And so with that as sort of the fact of the matter, we said, well, why is that? Why are operating companies transferring to trolls at such a great rate, and then those patents are coming back at them? And what we figured out from that, or at least we think we figured out, is that it's probably a timing issue, a simple timing issue. It's a lot faster to transfer assets to an NPE than it is to an operating company. And the reason for that, I think, this is just my opinion, but I think if you're an operating company, you have a whole variety of IP issues. You have IP issues to protect your product, and you're dealing with those. Your business model is not buying and asserting. So if you're an MPE, that is your model. And so you have all your resources going towards looking at deals as they come in and acting quickly on them. We cannot move as quickly, and I'm sure everyone on the panel who, from their days at operating companies would agree, we're not fast. We've got other issues, and when you're gonna spend a lot of money, that takes a lot of time. So with the timing is sort of one of the hurdles. We thought, let's try something simple. So the latest experiment is the Patent Purchase Promotion Program, which I'm glad I said that correctly. It's
very alliterative.
So many P's, yes. And the idea is, let's make it faster and easier to sell patents to operating companies. So it's a total experiment, and the idea is that we'll just gather information on whether or not it works. So the premise is, for a 2-week window, I believe, the sellers can bring patents to us one at a time. So one US granted patent per submission, unlimited submissions, but one per submission. 2-week window to submit, and a deadline by which we will say yes or no to that. It's with a fixed price. So the idea is, we think that this will make it easier for us to look at these, make decisions quicker than we usually do, and act on them. And so we're going to see if that works, and sort of, it's totally experimental, so we'll talk to you again in July about the results of that. But we have the other program that we were part of starting was the license on transfer, which we call LOT. And this is a similar idea. It's the same problem, which is, you know, transferring patents to MPEs, coming back to be asserted against operating companies. The idea is that people are members of this program, and then if they transfer out a patent to an MPE, there's a license back to those who are members of the group as well. So you've
Which
pledged.
companies are members?
We are. There's the website has the current
Okay.
member list. Yeah, I apologize for not having
But
it
mostly
off the top
large
of my head.
companies.
Actually, a big mix. A big mix. If you're a smaller company, you may want to be a member just for when you become successful down the line too. So we do incentivize smaller companies to join because the truth is, small companies may not be successful. It's a tough business, and those are some of the patents that will go to MPs first. So it is important to have a mix of companies in that group. And so that idea, it's sort of the same issue of the transfer problem. That's how we view it. So some experiments around it. I'd love to hear what people think about some of the other things on the market now.
So when I founded AST, the reason I left IBM to do that was because it was a problem. The troll problem was quite large for IBM and for large operating companies. And the premise there is to have a sort of a catch and release function where you're having the ability to go out and get patents before they get in the hands of these guys. And then once you have a collective nature of companies that are members that participate in the auction in buying these, then you provide them with a license and then you spit them back out into the market. Once the problem has been solved for them, then others can repurchase those patents. But the ones that are really concerned, the members, already have a license to that. So it was a pretty unique model. Another model that when I founded Unified Patents, the thing now we mentioned it briefly before is the IPRs, right? So doing inter-party reviews, essentially challenging patents that, in this case, trolls already own these patents, and you're trying to create an ecosystem approach of going after a technology area. In the case of cloud storage, that was the first area we went after. Picked all the large and small companies in cloud storage that have problems with trolls or potential problems, and you put them into this ecosystem. You charge a membership fee, they become part of the club, and you identify selected patents, problematic patents that have either been litigated by trolls or potentially will be, and you go out and you challenge them in the patent office and you try and do IPRs, and they've been very successful in defeating a number of these. And so what it does is it keeps trolls away. Trolls that are targeting cloud storage will hopefully not go after them because they know that Unified Patents is a shield protecting them in that technology space. So I think it's a very interesting model that's starting to do well. IPXI is one that we invested in initially at Philips, and when I came on board, this was before I came on board, thank God, otherwise I never would have made the investment. But it's an interesting model, but it's being run by investment bankers, right, that really didn't have the background in IP. And they have an interesting advisory board and board full of people that are very knowledgeable in IP, but it's a model that would never work for licensing, right? So it's a model that sort of, you should buy these unit licensing rights because it's for the good of society. It just will never work, and it proved itself as a failure ultimately. RPX is another model that's out there. They are a public company that is a troll deterrent, at least that's what they claim themselves to be. We are a member of RPX, I think Google is as well, and but it's an interesting mix of companies that, once again, they're trying to do this anti-troll behavior of going out and solving problems that are either existing through going out to litigations and helping their members getting out of those litigations with these trolls, or helping to buy the patents before the trolls get them. So there's a number of models out there, and I think there'll continue to be more of these as long as these problems continue to exist.
Well, I was just going to, I guess, add the IPXI model. Brian and I were actually talking about it before the meeting, the class, and about 2 years ago, we were attending quite a few of these Wall Street sessions where they were a lot of interest on Wall Street on IP, and so we were in these various luncheons and dinners where we talked to IP, and IPXI came up, and back then we were like, how is this going to work? We didn't understand it. And I think my opinion, fundamental thing is a patent is not a commodity. It's not gold, it's not oil, it's all different. And so whenever you try to take something and the financial guys try to commoditize it and collateralize it or whatever they do, it just doesn't work, because ultimately it's just a piece of paper if it's it made invalid. So that would be the point I would make about IPXI.
On the other hand, it's places like MPEG and other pools have made this work in a sort of more fixed price sort of commoditized model. How would you just make a distinction between?
The distinction is that the patent itself, they're trying to take a group of patents and trying to say, okay, now we're going to the same model for every patent. That doesn't work. The pool concept is just the opposite. You're kind of taking in all this stuff and you're throwing it into a barrel and you're saying, hey, you can have everything in the barrel for 1%. Okay, and some are going to be good and some are going to be bad. That's the negative about pools, is that if I have an unbelievable portfolio, why would I want to throw it in with, I'll pick on Brian's portfolio, which is, I feel, is garbage. And how are
to pick on me.
how are we gonna share that? You know, so you know, my portfolio is going to help you kind of come along with yours. And that's the thing. They're not all equivalent. Every patent's not the same. That's where I would make the distinction. I think the way I understood, if I did understand the IPXI model, it kind of tried to throw patents in and treat them like you would, you know, any other commodity, from a standalone perspective.
Yeah, from a theoretical perspective, I can see how it might work, and you sort of understood the rationale behind it and the mechanism. But the fact is, there's so much innovation that goes into even a bad patent. There could be a lot of innovation that went into it. So it's really difficult to ascertain the true value of it until it's really tried and true and tried out in the market and put to task. A comment just about the pools. I mean, when you're talking about pooling, as we did before, typically we refer to standards-based pools, in which case every patent is equal because they're all standard essential. The story really changes a lot when you're talking about aggregates outside of a standards-based arrangement, where the value of the technology really plays a big role in its place in the pool itself. And there are portfolios that have winners in them. They, you know, so-called gold-plated, or your proud patents, and then some of the other fluff that you have in it. That exists all over the place, and that's to a large extent that's part of the black art in evaluating large patent portfolios.
I think pools. I'm a big fan of pools. I mean, we're an equity stakeholder in MPEG-LA, and we get a lot of money from our pools there. We're a member in about I think 8 or 9 different types of pools. Through VIA, MPEG-LA, and entities like that, CISFEL. And I think it's good because it allows you to take the burden away from doing your one-stop shopping of going out to all these different companies and licensing, and you're allowing this to take place. In the standard essential patents, I think it makes perfect sense, because as long as the patents are, you know, they're deemed standard essential, they'll be folded into the pool and then they're licensed out for one fee. So I think it's good. But even with that said, it could be a tiger with no teeth unless the teeth can be shown. And so MPEG-LA and VIA and others are not afraid to litigate as well, which I think so if a company's deciding whether or not to join this pool, I think that's a big factor in deciding to do that, because they know that there is a chance that litigation might happen.
Well, and that's the big concern too, right? I mean, in the sense that, or not concern, a big issue, you get, you know, smaller pools or even larger ones. Whose patent do you use for litigation? You know, who wants to have the IPRs filed against their patents? So you always have everybody, you know, kind of saying, yeah, we'll join the pool, we'll go out, we'll litigate, and then when it's time to litigate, everybody kind of is staring at the ceiling. Not my patent. You know, and going back to your point about the quality of patents, you know, most companies, you know, if it's 3%, let's say even 5% of their entire portfolio, that's, you know, a viable, proud set of patents that are used, that are going to withstand litigation, that's probably a high number. So, you know, the quality of patent is really is really something that's, you know, it's tough to quantify.